complicated and least understood is that of the pole vault. Due to its demanding technique and required skill, few possess the courage and strength to be successful at the event. Like many great events in the Olympics, the pole vault began as nothing more than a practical everyday function. From its origin in the Netherlands to its integration to the Olympics, the sport of pole vault has evolved over the years. By learning more about its history, I hope to give you all a better appreciation for the sport itself. It began as a farmer's tool, then an Olympic phenomenon, and the sport has progressed tremendously throughout the years. In places such as the Netherlands and Ireland, farmers and workers would use long poles to navigate the marshes of the fields. They used their poles to launch themselves over the streams and bogs instead of walking through them and getting wet. The pole vault was nothing more than a farmer's tool used for efficiency of travel. Because of this, early pole vault competitions were based on distance traveled rather than height. The earliest record of pole vault as an actual competition was at the Tailteann Games of ancient Ireland. These games tested the skills and the strength of their warriors, and pole jumping was one of them. Although the Tailteann Games were the first games pole vault appeared in, they certainly weren't the last. The pole vault appeared in the first modern Olympics of 1896. The world record was set that year at 10 feet 10 inches with an ash pole. To give you a bit of perspective on the height, the current world record is 20 feet 2 inches, set by the man that you just saw on the video. Because the Olympics were so new, popularity for all events increased tremendously. Between 1904 and 1912 alone, 5 world records were broken as more and more athletes began joining the sport. Because pole vault is considered the most athletically demanding of all the track and field events, it was primarily considered a man's sport. In fact, there were no women's pole vault competitions until 1998 at the Millrose Games in New York City. But the women's pole vault captivated the world's attention, and it was admitted into the 2000 Olympics. Previous Stanford pole vault coach Casey Roach said of the women's pole vault, "This is the best illustration that women can do all things men can do." But who could pole vault were not the only changes that it went through in its history. Several other changes were made in order for pole vault to be the sport it is today, starting with what the poles were made of. In the early stages of its history, pole vault poles were made of ash, hickory, spruce, or bamboo. At the end of these poles was a large iron tap with 3 large spikes on it that allowed the pole to stick into the ground when it was planted. It wasn't until 1912 that the modern-day plant box was allowed at the Olympics. The plant box is a small box at the end of the runway that the pole is placed in as a point of access in the vault. Because the pole materials were so prone to breaking, in the late 1940s, a steel pole was introduced. Seeing as the steel pole was so unyielding, the athletes were forced to use a stiff pole technique, which meant they relied only on their own strength and velocity to get themselves over the bars. It wasn't until after the war that fiberglass poles were allowed into the Olympics. Fiberglass poles are much more flexible than the steel poles, allowing athletes to rely on both their own athleticism and the pole's natural elasticity. The first time a fiberglass pole was used in the Olympics, the previous world record was broken by over a foot. Writer and historical pole vaulter Hugh H. Baxter said of the early vaulting, "Up to 1897, American pole vaulters used various styles, all of them crude and unscientific. Today, the material and techniques are more uniform and used by almost the same by everyone all around the world." Overall, the sport of pole vault has seen many changes. From a farmer's tool in the Netherlands to an adored event in the Olympics, the techniques have changed to make it more efficient. When done correctly, pole vault appears to be one of the most graceful and powerful sports of all time. But like any sport, the basis of it is to compete. At the end of the day, the history and the techniques don't matter. As an anonymous coach once put it, competitive spirit is the main thing. Never mind the